Alrighty, what's up guys, Single Player Nacho here. And I know exactly what you're thinking about right now. What do these killers from Dead by Daylight smell like? And the first thing that comes to my mind is rotten beef, dust, old fabric, and ancient farts. And so without further ado, these are the most ancient killers in Dead by Daylight. First up, we have Kazan Yamaoka, the Oni, who is 300 to 400 years old. He's a very hot-headed samurai turned demon baby. Now the samurais began around 12th century Japan. This time era was known as feudal Japan, and the samurais were a group of militants with a very strict code of honor and battle. Fast forward 600 years later, and the samurais are basically dying out. But the heart of the Oni, the heart of Kazan, he did not want this to happen, and he was a very passionate samurai. And being passionate, he was also very, very violent. He slayed easily hundreds and hundreds of other warriors. Now this is all under the spell of the Bushido, the moral code that all samurais follow. Kazan followed the Bushido code to a fault. The Bushido has 8 virtues: justice, courage, mercy, politeness, honesty and sincerity, honor, loyalty, and self-control. Now you would think, okay, these are pretty honorable codes to live by. And our very own samurai Kazan was a pretty good boy. But here's the thing that was actually happening in feudal Japan. The samurai were supposed to protect their people, but they were also landowners, and there were a few accounts where they would punish lowly commoners for smaller crimes. Punish them how? Well, they would kill them. And I have a feeling that Kazan, because he was so obsessed with the samurai code, and because it was ending at its time, he definitely killed some innocent people. I mean, we would think they were innocent, but of course, during the feudal Japan era, they weren't. And it was also during this era that farmers and other civilians actually pretended to be samurai. They posed as them. And guess what? Kazan was pissed to oblivion because of this. So Kazan grabbed his father's sword and he slayed all of these farmers and people over the Bushido code. But that's the thing about feudal Japan. These farmers weren't posing as samurai for no reason. They were starving. Food was very hard to come by. People were poor, there wasn't a lot of medicine going around, and it was just a brutal time to be alive. And the Oni just made it that much worse. So there you have it, that's the Oni. A very old spirit, angry crybaby. Next up is the lovely Pyramid Head from Silent Hill, whose origins are an unknown infinite amount of time. This thing is a manifestation of the other world. You can't really put an age on that face. You take one look at the Pyramid Head or the Executioner and you know. You could probably find them in Roman depictions and paintings of executions and demon stuff. So how do we piece together a timeline of how exactly ancient the Pyramid Head is? Well, the Pyramid Head, whose name is not known, this guy's very mysterious, was once an executioner for a very batshit crazy cult known as the Order. And the Order's origins date back to the 1900s. That seems pretty recent in our time, I guess. So maybe he's not that ancient, but the man who was the executioner isn't the Pyramid Head we all know and love in Dead by Daylight. The manifestation known as the Pyramid Head is the thing that we're constantly running away from in a zigzag pattern. Yeah, that guy with a goddamn tunic covering his genitals. So the actual person known as the Executioner that belonged to the Order is no older than a century, but the symbolic creature known as the Executioner can be traced back to the time of angels and demons, who is meant to find people and demons, monsters, for their guilt, punish them, trap them, and of course make them suffer. That's what this guy likes to do. And in the lore version of the Pyramid Head in Dead by Daylight, it basically says when he's all out of a job of slaying people for a living, he just chills out for a very, very long time. I wonder how long these periods of time are. Could be decades, centuries, a millennia. Another thing that we have to remember is we don't know how exactly time works in the otherworld realm. Time can stay stagnant, whereas time on Earth is going at a natural pace, 24 hours a day. And if we're counting the fact that the Pyramid Head is based on a symbol from the Old Age, this guy could be really f***ing old. And it actually makes him a pretty damn big threat, judging by the fact that he is pretty damn effective in killing things. He's also been doing it for I mean just an infinite amount of time. Now the cult, the order that believes in the Pyramid Head, has a very simple goal. They want to bring about the doomsday end of the world. Now they're very crazy, but they also have a set of rules. And if one of their cult members breaks those rules, the executioner torments them. But I'm going to bring around a very interesting point. In the DBD world, the entity is older than time itself. So the Pyramid Head could have been working for the entity, even though it's been working for the order this entire time. Regardless, all this talk about prophets, good and evil symbols from the beginning of time reminds us that the Pyramid Head is old as hell and stinky. Next up, we have the Plague, Adiris, the oldest stink, and probably the oldest Dead by Daylight original character. This beautiful, gorgeous priestess is about 4,860 years old. Time flies. Now, yeah, she is pretty old, but you look at that top half of her face that's sweltering with pus and vile plague, and then it continues down her neck. Like, I really actually want to know what you guys think she smells like, please? Like a tree trunk with diarrhea or something. Now, Adiris is from the time known as BCE, which is before the Common Era or before Christ, depending on how you feel about religion. In particular, the setting where Adiris comes from is Babylonia, which in today's world could be found in the east or just around Iraq. Now, bear with me because this is a very, very long time ago. I mean, it's fucking forever ago. But the people of Babylon lived a very simple life as you would imagine. They lived on roofs, slept there, and cooked there. And the religion that over-encompassed Babylonia, their deities and gods were like sun gods still, that's where they were. And in comes a 5-year-old girl known as Adiris. And Adiris, or the Plague, fell in line with Babylonian religion and customs. And as the youngest of 7 children, she was a servant at the temple of those Babylonian gods. She cooked and she cleaned, and one of her favorite tasks was to clean the incense burners. Of course, this becomes one of her weapons when we find her in Dead by Daylight. And that's when Adiris' world is turned upside down, for the better, I guess. The people at the temple figure out she is touched by the sun gods and is some kind of prophet for them. So she becomes a high-ranking priestess. And it was during this time period that people blindly worshipped any sight of the sun gods. They were so blind that they actually followed Adiris even when a plague poisoned Babylonia. A woman who had this plague came up to Adiris and begged her for a cure. Adiris, thinking that she's all high and mighty, said, "I shall cure this disgusting ass pus coming out of your foot, random woman." And kids, what are we not supposed to do when we're around sick people with the plague? We're not supposed to expose our own blood anywhere near them. But what did Adiris do? She cut her own foot, used the blood as an offering to the sun god, saying, "Please cure this woman." And what did the sun gods do? They said, "Now here's a nice thick layer of plague for you, Adiris. Good job." Now, of course, Adiris fell ill with the plague, along with her other followers. They all just grew these disgusting blips of pus all over their faces, thinking that it was for the sun gods. And they performed rituals after rituals to save their high priestess, and it never worked. Interestingly enough, in that temple, or the map known as Temple of Purgation in Dead by Daylight, there are glyphs from a very, very dead language all around the temple. These gold tablets contain the language known as Akkadian. And what do the glyphs translate to roughly? Well, they actually talk about the kingdom of Cimmerium, the king of Cimmerium, found within Mesopotamia, which is a pretty damn big deal in terms of history. And that's of course where Adiris comes from. Next up, we have Talbot Grimes, or the Blight. Mr. No Jaws over here. Mr. Loose Teeth. I don't know, I could just come up with a million nicknames for this guy. This very, very old man. Now, the character known as the Blight isn't actually that old. He was a Scottish chemist, so therefore he was around when Scotland was around. But the energy known as the Blight that engulfs Talbot is as old as the entity. We're gonna get into some entity lore here, but apparently this Blight is one of its manifestations, you know, like the fog, the realms or the maps that we play in, the blood web, those all belong to the entity. And the Blight just so happens to be one of those manifestations that the entity revels itself in. The Blight is like a plague of its own when it enters the entity, and this Blight takeover of the entity happens once a year. It's like a seasonal flu, and you'll see it on the maps when it actually comes around during one of the Dead by Daylight seasons. you'll have these thick, pulsating pumpkin stalks all around the maps. And even though the entity is a very ancient form of evil, it's also weakened by the blight, which comes along with it, making it also pretty damn ancient. And that goes all the way back to Talbot Grimes. He just so happened to be one of those chemists that were playing around with people's brains. It just so happens that Talbot uncovered a neural pathway into the entity, the other realms that are outside of our dimension, the realms found in Dead by Daylight. So even though Talbot Grimes isn't centuries old, his powers, the blight, the thing that makes him into a monster, is an evil checkpoint for the entity. Keeps everything in balance when people are being killed mercilessly. Isn't that beautiful? And the last of the ancient killers is the Hag. Of course it is. Just look at this decrepit corpse. The Hag's name, also known as Lisa Sherwood, actually means a witch or the form of an ugly old woman. I'm sorry. I hope that doesn't hurt your feelings. I mean, actually no. Those goddamn traps she lays around the map are so annoying to deal with. You goddamn hag. Now while Lisa Sherwood's time is basically around our time, the modern age, her supernatural powers and inspiration are definitely centuries old. Now Lisa was a regular young woman, a little bit more pettier than usual though. She kinda hated her teacher and wanted the perfect grade on her test. She would check out her grandma's textbook. It was very mysterious and old looking, and it talked about a symbol, a very ancient symbol. And these markings brought Lisa better grades and other forms of luck. Now Lisa's grandmother warned her about these markings, saying, "This is some dangerous shit. Don't use this for just about whatever." But Lisa did not listen. Not only did she use it for menial tasks like getting better grades, it also ended up kind of killing her disliked teacher. That's not cool, Lisa. Now, Lisa didn't think much of it. In fact, she kind of had doubts about this whole supernatural power that she was reading about in her grandma's textbook. But one fatal night, Lisa was abducted by kidnappers. Just so happened that they were cult members. The cannibal type. Out of options and she didn't know what else to do, she wrote that symbol using her blood, and it killed all of her kidnappers. So where does this supernatural power come from? It can be traced back to the First Nation Algonquin tribes. These were the native tribes that existed before Europeans entered North America. And these tribes had myths about cannibalism. They believed that people who would eat other people, does not sound tasty at all, would become demons, go completely insane, and their entire appearance would melt. They would become husks of people, very bony, a lot like the Hag's appearance. So we're talking thousands and thousands of years ago, before the modern age, and before Lisa Sherwood's tale. But outside of lore stuff, the Hag seems to derive some inspiration from the Wendigo, who is not only a cannibalistic mythological creature or supernatural force, it was also a myth created by the Algonquin tribes, which is extremely similar to the Hag's lore, and the developers definitely had some inspiration from that. I mean, those powers had to come from somewhere, Mrs. Hag, as well as all that appearance from the... I mean, she looks like a baby back rib. Well, thank you guys so much for checking out this video. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to subscribe and like for more horror lore, countdowns, and mysteries. And please let me know how each and every one of these killers smelled like. In your opinion, I want 5 nicknames for the 5 killers we talked about. They're all ancient, but I want to know about their smell, mostly. Again, thank you so much, and if you have a second, check out the merch page if you want to support the channel any further. There's a sweater that will keep you single, keep you safe, and keep you warm. There's also a cute little sticker, a little nacho sticker that you can attach to your folders, or just slap it on the wall and people will be like, what is that redundant symbol? What does it even mean? Link will be in the description. And if you have a second, check out the second channel, where I play a bunch of random horror games and other dumb stuff. Check it out. I think it's funny. Probably just me though. Link will be in the description for that as well. Again guys, thank you so much for all the support. Have an awesome rest of your day. And as always, stay single.